The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor the same moment Isla Fisher's heart did. The ballroom of the Whitmore Hotel fell silent, 300 pairs of eyes turning toward the sound. But Isla barely noticed the golden liquid pooling at her feet, or the fragments of crystal scattered like fallen stars. Her gaze was locked on her husband's face, Stout Duncan, the man who had promised her forever just 7 years ago, now standing beside a blonde woman half his age, his hand possessively wrapped around her waist. "Ladies and gentlemen!" Stout's voice boomed across the charity gala, commanding attention with the same arrogance that had once charmed her. "I have an announcement to make." Isla's fingers trembled as she reached for the edge of the table, her chocolate skin flushing with a premonition of disaster. She'd known something was wrong for months. The late nights, the dismissive glances, the way he'd started criticizing everything from her natural hair to her laugh. But she'd never imagined he would do this here, at the annual Children's Hospital fundraiser she had organized. "As many of you know, life is about evolution," Stout continued, his steel-grey eyes scanning the crowd but never meeting hers. "It's about recognizing when you've outgrown certain situations." The blonde, Naomi Watts, Isla recognized her now, his 28-year-old personal trainer, giggled and pressed closer to him. The 4-carat diamond on her finger caught the chandelier light, sending rainbows across the walls. "That's why I'm here to announce that Isla and I are getting divorced," he said, as casually as if announcing a change in dinner plans. "And Naomi and I are engaged." The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Isla stood frozen, her dignity the only thing keeping her upright. 7 years of marriage reduced to a public spectacle. 7 years of supporting his dreams, hosting his business dinners, being the perfect corporate wife while putting her own interior design aspirations on hold. "You see," Stout continued, his voice taking on a cruel edge, "a man in my position needs a partner who understands the demands of high society, someone who can elevate the lifestyle, not hold it back." The words sliced through her like shards of the broken champagne flute. Harper Street James, the gallery owner who had become her closest confidant, started moving toward her through the crowd, but Isla held up a hand. She would not be rescued. Not here. Not like this. "Isla's a lovely woman," Stout said, finally looking at her with mock sympathy. "But let's be honest, she was never quite worthy of this world. She tried, bless her heart, but some people are meant for simpler things." Naomi's laugh tinkled like broken glass. "Oh, Stout, you're terrible," she cooed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Though I suppose it's true what they say about compatibility. Cultural differences can be so challenging." The racial undertone wasn't lost on anyone. Isla felt the room's energy shift, some faces showing disgust at Stout's behavior, others, too many others, nodding in silent agreement. She had always been the only black woman in most of these circles, tolerated because of Stout's status, never truly accepted. Charlotte Hayes, one of the few genuine friends she'd made, stepped forward. "Stout, this is neither the time nor the place." "On the contrary," he interrupted, "transparency is everything in our circle. I respect Isla too much to let her live in delusion. She deserves to know that I've already filed the papers. Naomi and I will be married next month in the Hamptons. You're all invited, of course." Isla found her voice then, steady and clear, despite the tears threatening to fall. "You're right, Stout." The room fell silent again. "I was never meant for your world," she continued, each word carefully measured. "Because your world is built on cruelty masquerading as class, on emptiness dressed in designer labels. I confused your attention for love, your possession for partnership." She picked up her clutch from the table, her movements graceful and deliberate. "But you've done me a favor tonight. You've freed me from the prison of trying to be worthy of someone who never knew my worth." Stout's face reddened. He hadn't expected her to speak. In his script, She was supposed to crumble, to beg, to make a scene that would justify his actions. "Dramatic as always," he muttered. "This is exactly what I mean." "What you mean?" Isla interrupted, her voice rising with quiet power. "Is that you're a small man who needs to diminish others to feel tall. Enjoy your victory, Stout. Enjoy your child bride and your champagne toasts. But know this. One day, you'll look for depth and find only surfaces. You'll reach for love and find only transactions." She turned to Naomi, whose smug expression had faltered slightly. "And you, darling, enjoy the ring. It's the same one he gave his first wife. He had it reset, of course, but the center stone has a flaw, a carbon spot near the left prong. He thought I never noticed, just like he thinks you'll never notice the calls he makes at 2 a.m. or the way he looks at younger women when you're not watching." Naomi's hand instinctively covered the ring, her face paling. Isla walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble with metronomic precision. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. As she passed Harper, her friend whispered, "Magnificent." But Isla barely heard her. She was focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on making it to the door before the tears fell. Behind her, she heard Stout trying to recover, making jokes about emotional women, but the laughter was forced and sparse. The valet brought her car, the modest Lexus that Stout had always complained about, saying it didn't match their status. She'd loved that car, bought it with her own money from her design work before they'd married. It was hers, untainted by his influence. As she drove away from the hotel, the tears finally came. Not just for the marriage that had ended, but for the woman she'd lost trying to fit into his world. She'd straightened her hair because he said natural styles were unprofessional. She'd dimmed her laugh because he said it was too loud. She'd stopped wearing the bright colors that made her feel alive because he preferred her in beige and gray. Her phone buzzed incessantly, messages from friends she assumed, offering support or seeking gossip. She ignored them all except one from Grace Caldwell, her college roommate, who'd warned her about Stout from the beginning. "Just saw the news. I'm flying in from Chicago. Wine and wisdom waiting." Isla pulled into the driveway of the house she'd soon have to leave, a monument to Stout's ego with its cold, modern lines and colorless palette. She'd tried to warm it with art and textiles, but he'd always complained, moving her additions to the guest rooms where they wouldn't clash. Inside, she found he'd already been there. His closet was empty, his office cleared. On the kitchen counter was a manila envelope, the divorce papers, and a sticky note in his handwriting. "Be out by month's end. The house is in my name." She laughed then, a bitter sound that echoed in the empty space. Of course it was. Everything was in his name. He'd insisted on it for tax purposes, and she'd trusted him. Why wouldn't she? She'd loved him. But as she climbed the stairs to their bedroom, her bedroom now, something shifted in her chest. The humiliation was transforming into something else. Determination, perhaps. Or maybe just the first spark of remembering who she was before she'd become Mrs. Stout Duncan. In the closet, behind his abandoned suits, she found them, her design portfolios from college, hidden away since their wedding. She pulled them out, dust motes dancing in the light from the window. The sketches were bold, vibrant, full of the passion she'd buried trying to be worthy of a man who would never see her value. Tomorrow, she would cry again. Tomorrow, she would face lawyers and moving trucks and the dismantling of a life. But tonight, she spread the portfolios across the bed and remembered the girl who'd dreamed in color, who'd believed she could transform spaces and lives with beauty and intention. That girl had been worthy all along. Chapter 2. The Ruins. Isla woke to find her entire world had been screenshot, shared, and dissected across social media before her morning coffee had finished brewing. The video of Stout's announcement had gone viral overnight. Someone had filmed the entire humiliating spectacle. The comments ranged from supportive to cruel, but it was the headline that made her stomach turn. Investment banker dumps wife for younger model at charity event, as if her 7 years of marriage could be reduced to a tabloid cliché. She stood in the kitchen of her new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in Brooklyn that cost more than most people's mortgages, and tried not to compare it to the Manhattan penthouse she'd left behind. The space was smaller than Stout's home office, but the morning light streaming through the windows was honest and warm, nothing like the cold designer lighting he'd insisted on. Her phone rang. The divorce lawyer, Bet Winters, a sharp woman Charlotte Hayes had recommended. "I've reviewed the prenup," Bet said without preamble. "It's ironclad. You'll get the amount specified, $50,000, and nothing more." He kept everything in his name, every asset protected. $50,000. In New York, that might last her 6 months if she was careful. 7 years of marriage, and she was worth less than his monthly entertainment budget. What about alimony? The prenup waives it. You signed it, Isla. She had, 3 days before their wedding, when Stout had presented it as just a formality that proved their love was about more than money. She'd been so in love, so trusting, so stupid. "There is one thing," Bet continued, "the humiliation clause. The prenup states that neither party can publicly embarrass the other. His announcement at the gala, filmed and now viral, is a clear violation. We could negotiate for more." But even as Bet outlined the strategy, Isla knew she wouldn't pursue it. She didn't want his money tainted by lawyers and bitterness. She wanted to rebuild on her own terms. After the call, she sat among the boxes she hadn't yet unpacked and opened her laptop. Her design website, dormant for 3 years, stared back at her. Stout had convinced her to shut down her business after they married. "Why would my wife need to work?" he'd said, making it sound like a gift rather than a cage. She updated her portfolio with trembling fingers, uploading photos of the few projects she'd managed to complete secretly. Friends' nurseries, a cousin's restaurant, small jobs Stout never knew about. The work was good, she realized with surprise, more than good. There was a unique voice in her designs, a warmth and authenticity that the sterile spaces Stout preferred could never achieve. By noon, she'd sent inquiry emails to 17 potential clients. By 2 o'clock, she had 3 responses. By 4, she was standing in Grace Caldwell's hotel suite, crying into a glass of wine while her best friend plotted revenge. "We could destroy him," Grace said, her legal mind already working. "That video alone shows breach of fiduciary duty to the charity, making it about himself during a fundraiser. The board will be furious." But Isla shook her head. "I don't want to destroy him, Grace. I want to forget he exists. Honey, he publicly humiliated you. He called you unworthy. And proved he was right. I was unworthy of that treatment. I was worthy of so much more." Grace studied her friend's face, seeing something new there beneath the pain. "You're different. I'm remembering who I was before I became what he wanted." That evening, alone in her apartment, Isla found the courage to check her business email. 14 new inquiries had come in, most referencing the video. "Saw what happened," one wrote. "Anyone who maintains that much dignity deserves my business." Another, "Your husband's an ass. Let's make something beautiful despite him." But it was the last email that made her heart stop. "Ms. Fisher, I have a restoration project that requires someone with your particular sensitivity to space and meaning. The Whitmore Estate Library needs a complete redesign. If you're interested, please meet me at the Morgan Library Thursday at 2 p.m. A. Baldwin. The Whitmore Estate. Even Stout had been impressed by invitations there. Old money, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. The kind that had looked through Stout like he was wallpaper at the few events they'd attended. She Googled A. Baldwin and found almost nothing. A few charity mentions, no photos, no social media. Old money indeed. Thursday came too quickly. She stood outside the Morgan Library in her best remaining dress, a deep purple that Stout had hated, saying it was too ethnic. She'd loved it for exactly that reason, the way it made her dark skin glow, the way it announced rather than apologized for her presence. Inside, she wandered the rare book collection, losing herself in the beauty of ancient manuscripts and hand-tooled leather bindings. This was what Stout never understood. True luxury wasn't about price tags, but about story, craft, legacy. You appreciate beautiful things. The voice came from behind her, deep and cultured, but without the affected pronunciation Stout had adopted. She turned to find a man in his mid-40s, tall and lean, with salt and pepper hair and eyes the color of aged whiskey. His suit was expensive, but worn with the carelessness of someone who didn't need to prove anything. "Mr. Baldwin?" "Alistair." He extended his hand, and his handshake was firm but gentle. "Thank you for coming. Your email was intriguing. The Whitmore estate was my mother's family home. She died 2 years ago, and I've finally gotten the courage to address her library. It needs someone who understands that spaces hold memories, who can honor the past while creating something new." They walked through the museum as they talked, and Isla found herself relaxing. He asked intelligent questions about her work, her influences, her philosophy of design. Not once did he mention the video or Stout or the scandal that had made her briefly infamous. "The library is extensive," he warned. 12,000 volumes, some dating to the 16th century. The room itself hasn't been updated since 1962. "I love a challenge." He smiled then, the first real smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his serious face. "Somehow, I thought you might." They discussed timeline, budget, generous but not ostentatious, and her vision. She pulled out her tablet, sketching ideas as they talked, and didn't notice how close he'd moved until she could smell his cologne. Not the aggressive cloud Stout favored, but something subtle, like leather and bergamot. "You're left-handed," he observed. "Yes. My mother was too. She said it meant she saw the world differently, from a different angle than everyone else." "Did she?" "Every single day." His voice carried a grief that was still fresh, still tender. "She would have liked you." It was an odd thing to say to someone you'd just met, but somehow it didn't feel odd. It felt like recognition. As they parted outside the library, he handed her a card with just his private number. "Call when you're ready to see the space. And Ms. Fisher, Isla, don't undervalue your work or yourself. The right people will recognize quality." She watched him disappear into a waiting town car, no logos, no flash, just quiet elegance. So different from Stout's need to announce his wealth at every turn. That night, she looked up the Whitmore estate. The images that appeared took her breath away. A Gilded Age mansion on the Hudson, 60 rooms, gardens designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. The library alone was the size of her entire apartment. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Forgot to mention, the library has a ghost. My mother probably, making sure I don't let someone awful redesign her sanctuary. I have a feeling she'll approve of you. A." Isla smiled, the first genuine smile since that horrible night at the gala. She had lost everything she thought mattered, the husband, the house, the status. But maybe, just maybe, she was finding something better, something real, something worthy of the woman she was becoming. Chapter 3. The Encounter. The Whitmore estate rose from the Hudson Valley mist like something from a dream, all limestone and legacy, windows that had watched centuries pass. Isla drove her Lexus up the winding drive, past gardens that even in late autumn held a kind of formal beauty. She'd dressed carefully, professional but authentic, a burgundy wrap dress that complemented her skin, her natural hair in an elegant updo that Stout would have hated. She wasn't dressing for Stout anymore. Alistair met her at the door himself, no butler or assistant in sight. "Most people get lost at the third fountain," he said by way of greeting. "I have an excellent sense of direction." "Good. The library's been waiting long enough for someone who knows where they're going." He led her through rooms that should have felt like a museum, but somehow didn't. Yes, there were Sargent portraits and Tiffany lamps, but there were also stacks of well-read books on side tables, a coffee mug on a priceless antique desk, a cat, enormous and orange, sleeping on what was definitely a 16th-century tapestry. "That's Fitzgerald," Alistair said, noticing her gaze. "He has no respect for provenance." "Named after F. Scott, yes, my mother's favourite. She said any cat pretentious enough to sleep on Renaissance art deserved a literary name." The library, when they reached it, stole her breath. 2 stories of built-in shelves, a coffered ceiling with hand-painted details, leaded glass windows that turned the afternoon light into jewels. But he was right. It was frozen in 1962, all heavy mahogany and oppressive green wallpaper, the books themselves almost invisible in the gloom. "It's magnificent," she breathed. "It's a mausoleum." His voice carried frustration and grief in equal measure. Mother always meant to restore it, but after Father died, she said it felt wrong to change anything. Then she got sick, and... He trailed off, running his hand along a dusty shelf. "I want it to live again. To be a place where people actually want to read, not just store books like artifacts." Isla moved through the space slowly, touching surfaces, testing the light, already seeing possibilities. "The bones are extraordinary. We just need to let them breathe. Light colors, strategic lighting, maybe open some of these shelves to create reading nooks." She pulled out her tablet and began sketching, forgetting he was there until she felt him looking over her shoulder. "You see it," he said softly. "Not what it was. Not what it should be. But what it could be. That's my job." "No, that's your gift." She looked up to find him watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. She stepped back, professional distance restored. "I should measure... Of course. I'll leave you to work. The house manager, Mrs. Chen, is around if you need anything. I'll be in my study." He paused at the door. "Take your time. Mother always said the best things can't be rushed." Alone in the vast room, Isla lost herself in the work. She measured and photographed, made notes about sightlines and traffic flow. She was standing on the rolling ladder, examining the upper shelves, when she heard a crash below. Fitzgerald had knocked over her coffee. Mrs. Chen had brought it without being asked, and the contents were spreading across her sketches. She scrambled down, but Alistair appeared first, grabbing paper towels from somewhere, kneeling beside her to save her work. "I'm so sorry," he said, glaring at the cat who seemed utterly unrepentant. "Fitzgerald has opinions about people, usually negative ones. Actually, I think he knocked it toward the blank papers. Look, my sketches are fine." They were both on their knees, faces close as they examined the salvaged drawings. She could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar. "You're right," he said, but he wasn't looking at the sketches anymore. "Fitzgerald might actually like you. That's unprecedented." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then her phone rang, Stout's ringtone, because she hadn't bothered to change it yet. The spell broke. "I should..." She stood quickly, declining the call. "Of course." He stood as well, professional distance restored, but something new in his eyes. "I should mention, I'd like you to select some of the books for the redesign. Not the rare editions, of course, but Mother accumulated thousands of volumes that could be better curated. Would you be interested? I'm an interior designer, not a librarian. You're someone who understands that books are more than objects. That's what I need." She thought of her own books, still in boxes in her apartment, waiting for shelves she couldn't afford yet. All right. Good. Can you come back Saturday? We could spend the day going through the collection. Saturday. Not a work day, but the way he asked, careful and hopeful, made it clear this was still professional. Mostly. Saturday works. He walked her to her car, Fitzgerald trailing behind like a feline chaperone. Your husband, Alistair said suddenly. He's a fool. She'd wondered when the subject would arise. Everyone knew about the video by now. Ex-husband, or soon-to-be. Still a fool. You don't know me well enough to say that. I know you spent 3 hours in that library and never once mentioned the Gutenberg Bible on the third shelf. You were more interested in the reading chair by the window, how the light would fall across someone's hands as they turned pages. That tells me everything I need to know about your priorities. There's a Gutenberg Bible? His laugh was rich and unexpected. Second shelf, actually, but you just proved my point. As she drove away, watching the house disappear in her rearview mirror, her phone rang again. This time she answered. Finally, Stout's voice, irritated and impatient. I need you to sign some papers for the house sale. Have your lawyer send them to mine. Don't be difficult, Isla. Just come by and sign them. Unless you're too busy with your little design jobs. The contempt in his voice when he said little design jobs made her grip the steering wheel tighter. Actually, I am busy. I'm working on the Whitmore estate. Silence. Then, that's impossible. Goodbye, Stout. She hung up on his protests, feeling a satisfaction that was probably petty, but definitely earned. Let him wonder. Let him realize that maybe, just maybe, she'd never needed him to be worthy of respect. Saturday arrived grey and misty, the kind of weather that made the estate look like something from a Gothic novel. Mrs. Chen let her in with a knowing smile. Mr. Baldwin is in the library. He's been there since sunrise, sorting books. Haven't seen him this engaged in anything since, well, in a long time. She found him surrounded by towers of books, reading glasses perched on his nose, completely absorbed in a leather-bound volume. He looked younger, less guarded, happy. Poetry, she guessed. He looked up, and his smile was embarrassed, but genuine. My secret vice. Mother infected me early. Listen to this. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Mary Oliver, his eyebrows rose. You know it. Wild geese. It got me through some dark times. She didn't mention that those dark times included last Tuesday. Mine too. He set the book aside carefully. Shall we begin? They worked side by side for hours, barely speaking but comfortable in the silence. She learned his system, keep, donate, repair, and he learned hers, organize by feeling rather than alphabet, create conversations between books rather than rigid categories. You're putting Fitzgerald next to Morrison, he observed at one point. They belong together. The death of illusion. And here I thought it was because they're both about men destroyed by their obsession with the wrong women. She looked at him sharply, but his expression was innocent. Too innocent. Are you psychoanalyzing my book arrangements? Wouldn't dream of it. As the day wore on, they talked more freely. She learned his mother had been a civil rights lawyer in the 60s, one of the only women in her firm. He learned her grandmother had been a seamstress who'd dressed Harlem's elite, that her love of textiles came from watching magic happen under those skilled hands. Is that why you married him? Alistair asked suddenly, then looked horrified. I'm sorry, that's none of my... It's fine, she considered her answer. I married him because he seemed to offer stability, safety. My father left when I was 12, and I thought someone like Stout, someone so aggressively permanent, could never disappear. But he did anyway, just took longer and hurt more. They were sitting on the floor by then, surrounded by books, sharing Chinese takeout that Mrs. Chen had mysteriously produced. "My wife left me for my business partner," Alistair said quietly. 5 years ago. Said I was too absorbed in my work, too distant. She was right. I'm sorry. Don't be. We were wrong for each other from the start. Getting married because it's expected, because it's what people of our class do, it's a terrible reason to bind your life to someone. What's a good reason? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, when being with them makes you more yourself, not less. When they see who you really are and choose to stay anyway. Their eyes met across the scattered books, and something shifted in the air between them. Not attraction, that had been there from the beginning, but recognition, understanding. Her phone buzzed. Grace, texting, "You okay? Stout's been calling me, trying to find you." Reality intruded. She stood, brushing dust from her jeans. "I should go." "Of course." He stood as well, then hesitated. "Isla, I should tell you, I don't usually, I hired you for your talent, not, I know. But I know that too." He smiled, rueful and boyish. "My mother always said I was transparent as glass." She sounds like she was wonderful. She was. She would have. He stopped, shook his head. "Saturday? Same time? It's a date." The words were out before she could stop them. I know what you mean, and I know what you meant." As she drove home, she thought about recognition, about seeing and being seen. Stout had looked at her every day for 7 years and never really saw her at all. Alistair had known her for 2 weeks and somehow saw everything. It thrilled her. It terrified her. It felt like coming home. Chapter 4. The Slow Bloom. The first snow of winter fell the day Isla discovered Alistair Baldwin wasn't who she thought he was. She'd been working in the Whitmore Library for 6 weeks, their Saturdays having evolved into a comfortable routine. He'd help her sort books in the morning, they'd share lunch, then she'd work on design plans while he read in the corner, occasionally offering thoughts that were surprisingly insightful for someone who claimed to know nothing about interior design. "You have paint in your hair," he said this particular Saturday, reaching toward her before catching himself. "May I?" She nodded, and his fingers were gentle as they found the streak of sage green she'd been testing on the walls. His touch lingered a moment too long, and she felt it everywhere. "Better." "Perfect," she managed, though she wasn't talking about her hair. They'd been dancing around this for weeks. The careful distance, the loaded silences, the way they found excuses to stand just a little too close when examining color swatches or book spines. She'd told herself it was nothing, that she was imagining the way his eyes followed her, the way his whole demeanor softened when she walked into a room. Then Mrs. Chen appeared with a tea tray and a worried expression. "Mr. Baldwin, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the Times is calling again. About the acquisition." Alistair's face darkened. "Tell them no comment." "What acquisition?" Isla asked after Mrs. Chen left. He hesitated. "It's nothing. Business." But later, when he stepped out to take a call, she Googled him properly for the first time. She'd avoided it before, wanting to know him as he was, not as the internet presented him. The results made her stomach drop. Alistair Baldwin, Chief Executive Officer of Baldwin International, net worth $3.2 billion. Recent acquisition of Nexus Technologies for $500 million. Photos of him with presidents, prime ministers, people whose names shaped the world. And in every photo, the same quiet intensity, the same reluctance to be center stage. She was still staring at her phone when he returned. "You looked me up." It wasn't a question. "You're a billionaire." "Yes." "You let me think. I assumed you were comfortable, but this..." Would it have mattered? She wanted to say no, but they both knew it would have. She'd have run, terrified of trading one cage for another, one man who saw her as an accessory for another. I'm still just me, he said quietly. The man who can't organize books alphabetically and reads poetry when he can't sleep and watches you work because you're the most fascinating person I've ever met. Alistair, I know you're not ready. I know you're still healing. I'm not asking for anything except to keep being part of your Saturdays. The rest, the money, the business, it doesn't matter. Not here. She looked around the library, their sanctuary from the world, and made a choice. Show me your favorite poem. His smile was answer enough. They settled into the window seat he'd insisted she design into the space, and he pulled out a worn volume of Rumi, reading in his quiet voice while snow fell outside. She found herself watching his hands, the way they cradled the book like something precious. You're not listening, he said without looking up. I'm listening to something. Their eyes met, and the air between them crackled. He set the book down slowly, his hand coming to rest near hers on the cushion, not touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth. Isla. Her phone shattered the moment. Stout's lawyer. The divorce papers needed another signature. Reality crashing back. I should go, she said. Stay. The word was soft but urgent. Not for, just stay. Finish your work. Let me drive you home later. The roads will be terrible. She stayed. As afternoon melted into evening, they worked in companionable silence. She caught him watching her sometimes, his expression soft and unguarded. Once, bringing her tea, his fingers brushed hers, and neither pulled away immediately. Tell me about your dream project, he said, as they sat by the fire Mrs. Chen had lit. If you could design anything. A community center, she said without hesitation. Beautiful but functional. A place where kids could discover art, and adults could take classes, and everyone could feel like they belonged. Why that? Because beauty shouldn't be just for people who can afford it. Because everyone deserves spaces that make them feel valued. He was quiet for so long, she wondered if she'd said something wrong. Then, my mother would have loved you. You keep saying that, because it keeps being true. The snow was falling harder now, and Mrs. Chen appeared to announce the roads were officially dangerous. I've prepared the blue guest room, Ms. Fisher. Isla's protest died at Alistair's expression, hopeful and terrified in equal measure. Just for safety, he said. I'll be in my wing, completely separate. Mrs. Chen will get you anything you need. She agreed, telling herself it was purely practical. The guest room was beautiful, all soft blues and creams, with a view of the snow-covered gardens. Mrs. Chen had left her toiletries and a selection of clothes that would mysteriously fit perfectly. She couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, too full of possibilities. Finally, she crept back to the library, only to find Alistair there, reading by lamplight. Couldn't sleep either, he asked. Too much quiet. I know what you mean. Mother used to say, empty houses echo with what might have been. She sat across from him, tucking her feet under her. What might have been for you? Before? A life of proper marriages and board meetings and dying slowly of meaninglessness. Now? He looked at her directly. Now I think about what might still be. Alistair, I know, too soon, too much, but Isla, I need you to know, this isn't about conquest or replacement or any of the things men like your ex-husband do. This is about a man who's lived in shadows, finding someone who brings light. I'm not light. I'm broken and bitter and you're rebuilding. There's a difference, and you're teaching me how to rebuild too. She wanted to run, she wanted to stay, she wanted things she wasn't ready to want. Read to me, she said instead, something that doesn't hurt. He read Hafez until her eyes grew heavy, his voice weaving through her dreams. When she woke, she was covered with a cashmere throw, and he was gone, but there was a note. Beauty isn't just for those who can afford it. Thank you for reminding me. A. The next Saturday she found blueprints on the library desk. Plans for a community center in Brooklyn, the neighborhood where she now lived. Her name was listed as lead designer. What is this? A proposition, business only. He held up his hands at her expression. The foundation needs a project. You need a dream project, no strings. There are always strings. Not this time. Your vision, your decisions. I'm just the checkbook. She studied the plans, saw the potential, felt the dangerous hope rising. Why? Because you're right. Everyone deserves beautiful spaces, and because watching you create them is... He stopped, color rising in his cheeks. Because it's the right thing to do. She knew there was more, saw it in the way he looked at her, the way his hands shook slightly as he showed her the plans. This man, who commanded boardrooms and shaped industries, trembling because she was standing close enough to smell his cologne. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. But that night, as she lay in her small apartment, thinking about the blueprints, she realized it wasn't business that scared her. It was the way Alistair Baldwin looked at her like she was already whole, when she still felt shattered. The way he offered her dreams without asking for anything in return. Stout had taken everything and called it love. Alistair offered everything and called it nothing. She didn't know which was more dangerous. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but she recognized the elegant phrasing immediately. The library feels empty without you arguing about book placement. Fitzgerald agrees. He knocked over an entire shelf in protest. A. Despite herself, she smiled. Then came the photo. Fitzgerald among scattered volumes, looking entirely unrepentant. She texted back, "Tell him I'll bring treats on Saturday. Just Fitzgerald. We'll see." She could almost hear his smile in his response. Hope is the thing with feathers. That's Dickinson, not Hafez. I contain multitudes. Now you're just showing off. Is it working? She laughed alone in her apartment, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it. The terrifying, wonderful possibility of being seen and chosen, of choosing in return. Saturday couldn't come soon enough. Chapter 5. The test. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday, 3 months into the library project. You think you're clever, don't you? Stout's voice, slurred with alcohol and rage. Isla sat up in bed, instantly alert. How did you get this number? I know all about your little arrangement with Baldwin. Spreading your legs for another rich man already? You're drunk. I'm informed. Do you know what people are saying? That my ex-wife is gold-digging her way through Manhattan. That I was right to leave you. Stout, we're divorced. What I do? We're not divorced yet. Papers aren't final for another month. And I'll be damned if I let you embarrass me like this. The line went dead. She didn't sleep the rest of the night, his words poisoning every good feeling she'd built up. Gold digger. The accusation stung because she knew others would think it too. Black woman leaves one rich white man for an even richer one. The optics were devastating. By morning, she'd made a decision. She called Alistair's office. She never called him directly during the week, maintaining professional boundaries. I need to step back from the project, she said when he answered, concern clear in his voice. What's happened? Nothing. I need to focus on other clients. Isla, talk to me. There's nothing to discuss. I'll send my assistant to finish the measurements. I don't want your assistant. I want... He stopped. I'm coming over. Don't. But an hour later he was at her door, looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. His usual composure cracked. Tell me what he said. I don't know what... Stout called you. Theo saw him at a bar last night, ranting about you and me. What did he say? She turned away, but Alistair caught her hand gently. Please. He called me a gold digger, said everyone would think... She couldn't finish. And you believed him? Number maybe. I don't know. She pulled free, wrapping her arms around herself. The optics. Damn the optics. She'd never heard him curse before. It was startling, effective. Isla, look at me. When she did, his eyes were fierce. You are the most talented designer I've met. You're brilliant and kind, and you see beauty where others see nothing. If anyone suggests you're anything less than extraordinary, they're blind. But people will say, let them. I've been gossiped about my entire life. You learn to let it wash over you like white noise. It's different for you. You're a man, white, rich. Yes, all of that. But I'm also someone who knows what it's like to be reduced to a single story. Poor little rich boy, cold corporate shark, forever defined by money I inherited rather than who I choose to be. He moved closer, not touching but near enough that she could feel his warmth. You know who I really am. I know who you are. Isn't that what matters? Before she could answer, her phone rang. Grace. Check your email, her friend said without preamble. Now. The message was from someone named Mason Cross, Stout's business partner. The subject line, you should know the truth about your ex-husband. She opened it with trembling fingers, Alistair reading over her shoulder. Photos, documents, evidence of Stout transferring assets to offshore accounts. Proof that Naomi Watts wasn't his first affair, just his most public. Screenshots of messages where he'd called Isla degrading names to his friends, years before their separation. But it was the last attachment that made her sink into a chair. A video from 2 years ago, Stout at a poker game, drunk and laughing. Marriage is just another investment. You put in minimum capital, maximize returns. Isla's beautiful enough for the photos, compliant enough for the lifestyle. Best part? She actually thinks I love her. Alistair's hand found her shoulder, steady and warm. Why would Mason send this? She whispered. The answer came in another email, this one from Naomi Watts. Mason showed me everything. Stout's been stealing from everyone, including me. I'm leaving him. Thought you should know you're not the only one he fooled. I'm sorry for my part in hurting you. Isla laughed, bitter and broken. So I wasn't special. He didn't leave me for her. He just left. Isla, I need to be alone. No, Alistair said firmly. That's exactly what you don't need. He guided her to the couch, made tea with surprising efficiency in her tiny kitchen, then sat beside her, not touching, just present. He never loved me, she said finally. His loss. You don't understand. 7 years. I gave him 7 years, thinking if I just tried harder, loved better, changed more. Stop. His voice was sharp. You did nothing wrong. Love isn't something you earn by diminishing yourself. How would you know? The words came out harsher than intended. Because I did the same thing. Bent myself into shapes trying to be what my ex-wife wanted. The perfect society husband. The walking wallet. I disappeared so completely I forgot who I was until what? Until I met someone who saw me. Really saw me. Not the money or the name or the connections, just the man who reads poetry badly and can't organize books and loses entire afternoons watching her work because she makes creation look like dancing. The air between them hummed with possibility. I'm not ready, she whispered. I know. I may never be ready. I'll wait. That's not fair to you. Hope is always fair. Her phone rang again. This time it was Theodore Whitmore, Alistair's assistant. His usually calm voice panicked. Is Mr. Baldwin with you? There's a situation. Alistair took the phone, his face darkening as he listened. I'll handle it. What's wrong? Stout. He's at the estate, demanding to see me. He's making a scene. Oh God, Alistair, I'm so sorry. Come with me. What? Come with me. Face him. Show him he has no power over you anymore. She wanted to refuse, to hide, to run, but something in Alistair's eyes, trust maybe, or faith, made her nod. The drive to the estate was silent, but Alistair's hand found hers across the console and she didn't pull away. They could hear Stout before they saw him, his voice carrying across the grounds. "I know you're in there, Baldwin. Too scared to face me." He was standing by the fountain, dishevelled in a way she'd never seen him, his perfect image cracking. When he saw them approaching together, his face went purple. "You whore!" he spat at Isla. Alistair stepped forward, but Isla caught his arm. "Number, this is mine to handle." She walked toward her ex-husband, remembering another confrontation months ago when she'd had to maintain dignity while he destroyed her publicly. This time was different. This time she wasn't his to destroy. "You're drunk, Stout. Go home." "Home? You mean the apartment I'm renting because that bitch Naomi cleaned me out? Or maybe you mean the office I lost because Mason exposed my embezzlement?" So the empire was crumbling. She felt nothing, no satisfaction, no pity, nothing. "That has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you. You were supposed to disappear. You were supposed to be nothing without me. Instead, you're here with him, living the life you never deserved." "You're right," she said quietly. "I never deserved the life you gave me. I deserved so much better." He lunged forward, but Alistair was there, catching Stout's wrist in an iron grip. "Touch her, and I'll destroy what's left of your life," Alistair said, his voice deadly calm. "I'll make sure every crime you've committed is prosecuted, every hidden account exposed, every dirty secret published. You can't. I can. I choose not to, because Isla has more grace than you deserve, but test me again, and that changes." Security had arrived, discreet men in dark suits who positioned themselves strategically. "Leave," Alistair continued. "Don't contact her. Don't speak her name. Pretend she never existed, the way you did when you were married to her." Stout looked between them, something breaking in his expression. "She's nothing special, you know. You'll get bored. Men like us always do. Men like you, perhaps. But I'm nothing like you." Alistair's arm came around Isla's waist, protective and sure. "I know value when I see it." As security escorted Stout away, he threw one last look back, not at Isla, but at the estate, at the world he'd never quite managed to enter, despite all his striving. Isla was shaking. Alistair guided her inside, to the library where everything had started. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For bringing drama to your door, for being the kind of woman whose ex-husband—" He silenced her with a finger to her lips. "You're the kind of woman who maintains grace under impossible pressure, who builds beauty from ashes, who makes me want to be better than I am. Alistair, I'm falling in love with you." The words hung between them like suspended stars. "I know it's too soon. I know you're not ready. But I needed you to know that whatever he says, whoever judges, I'm here because my heart recognizes yours. Nothing more, nothing less." She wanted to run. She wanted to stay. She wanted to trust the warmth in his eyes, the safety in his arms. Instead, she said, "The library needs curtains. The afternoon light is too harsh." He smiled, understanding. "Then we'll get curtains." They worked in silence the rest of the afternoon, but something had shifted. The test had come, not from Stout's cruelty, but from Alistair's response to it. He hadn't tried to fight her battle or diminish her pain. He'd stood beside her, steady and sure, offering strength without stealing agency. That night, as she drove home alone, she allowed herself to think the word she'd been avoiding for weeks. Love. Not yet, but maybe. Maybe. Chapter 6. The Truth. The truth about Alistair Baldwin came wrapped in his mother's diary, discovered by accident on a rainy Thursday. Isla had been reaching for a design book on the highest shelf when the leather journal fell, pages scattering across the library floor. She knelt to gather them, meaning to simply return the diary to its place when her own name caught her eye. April 3rd, 2 years ago. Saw the most remarkable designer today at the Morrison Gallery, Isla Fisher. Such vision, such warmth in her work. If I were well enough to finally restore the library, she's exactly who I'd choose. Maid A, promised to remember her name. Her hands trembled. 2 years ago, before Alistair's mother had died, before Isla's world had imploded. "You're early," Alistair's voice from the doorway cut off as he saw what she held. The colour drained from his face. "Your mother knew who I was." He stood frozen, and in that moment she saw the truth written across his features. "You knew who I was," she continued, understanding flooding through her. "When you hired me. This wasn't coincidence." "Isla, how long have you been watching me? It's not what you think." "Then explain it." She stood, holding the diary like evidence. "Explain why your mother wrote about me 2 years ago. Explain why you just happened to contact me right after my divorce." He moved into the room slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. "My mother saw your work at the Morrison Gallery. She fell in love with your design for their reading room. She talked about you constantly those last months, how she wished she'd hired you, how she could see your soul in your work. And you? I looked you up after she died. I was grieving, going through her things, and your name kept appearing in her notes. So yes, I researched you. I learned you were married to Stout Duncan. I learned you'd stopped taking commissions, and I let it go. But then I saw the video, that horrible video of him humiliating you." His hands clenched at the memory, and all I could think was that Mother would be furious, this talented woman she'd admired, being destroyed by some small, cruel man. Isla sank into a chair, the weight of manipulation, even well-intentioned, crushing her. "So you swooped in to save me?" "No." He knelt in front of her, not touching, just meeting her eyes. "I contacted you because the library genuinely needed restoration, and you were genuinely the best person for it. Everything else, everything that's grown between us, that was never the plan." "How do I know what's real?" "Because I'm terrible at deception. Ask anyone. I can barely manage surprise parties." His attempt at levity fell flat. "Isla, I didn't fall for the designer my mother admired. I fell for the woman who argues with me about book arrangements, who brings coffee for Mrs. Chen without being asked, who hums Motown when she thinks no one's listening." "You still lied." "By omission, yes. And I'm sorry. I was afraid if you knew the connection, you'd think I was trying to fulfill some deathbed promise to my mother, that you'd feel obligated or patronized." She looked at the diary again, her fingers tracing her name in someone else's handwriting. A woman she'd never met had seen her worth when she'd been invisible to everyone who claimed to love her. "Tell me about her," she said quietly. Relief flooded his features. He sat on the floor beside her chair, his shoulder brushing her knee. She was brilliant, fierce. She fought for civil rights when it cost her everything socially. She married my father against her family's wishes. He was new money, Jewish, considered unsuitable. She loved gardens and mysteries and tea so strong it could strip paint. She sounds wonderful. She was. And lonely, especially after father died. I think that's why she noticed you. She saw something of herself, someone creating beauty in spaces that didn't always welcome her. Isla felt tears building. I wish I'd met her. She met you in a way, through your work. She used to say art was the truest conversation, soul speaking to soul across time and space. They sat in silence, rain pattering against the windows. Finally, Isla asked the question that frightened her most. "Would you have contacted me if it weren't for her?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I'd like to think fate would have found a way, but I don't know. Does it matter?" Did it? She thought about the weeks of working together, the slow build of trust, the way he looked at her like she hung the moon. None of that was because of his mother's diary. "Show me more," she said, holding out the journal. They spent the afternoon reading together, his mother's voice emerging from the pages, sharp, funny, heartbreaking in her honesty about illness and loss. And throughout, little mentions of art and beauty that had caught her eye, including several more references to Isla's work. June 15th. Saw IF's new installation at the Riverside Center. Such joy in her use of color. In another life we would have been friends. She collected photos of my work, Isla said, wonderstruck. They're in her study. I didn't want you to see them and think what you thought anyway. Show me. Betty Baldwin's study was exactly what Isla would have expected. Organized chaos, books everywhere, photos covering one entire wall, and there in a corner dedicated to art that moved her were printouts of Isla's designs. She saw me, Isla whispered. When I was invisible, she saw me. That's what she did, Alistair said. She saw people, really saw them. It's the only thing she taught me that I've never quite mastered. You see me because you're impossible to miss. She turned to him then, this complicated man who'd entered her life through a mixture of fate and intention, sorrow and hope. I need you to promise me something, she said. No more omissions, no more protecting me from truth. If we're going to, whatever this is we're doing, I need complete honesty. You have it. Then tell me why you're really falling in love with me. He didn't hesitate. Because you make me brave. Because you laugh at my terrible jokes but never at my dreams. Because watching you work is like watching someone conduct a symphony only they can hear. Because you're kind to people who can do nothing for you. Because you're rebuilding yourself without bitterness, just determination. Because when you're in a room, I can't look anywhere else. That's a lot of reasons. I have more. Would you like them alphabetically or by intensity? She laughed, surprising herself. You really are terrible at deception. The worst. Good. She kissed him then, soft and certain, tasting truth and possibility on his lips. When they pulled apart, his eyes were wide with wonder. Was that honesty, she said, complete honesty. That evening, as they worked side by side in the library, Isla found herself thinking about Bet Baldwin and the threads that connect people across time and loss. A woman she'd never met had seen her value, and, in dying, had somehow given her son the push to find her. Do you believe in fate? She asked suddenly. Alistair looked up from the book he was cataloguing. I believe in possibility, in the idea that certain people are meant to meet, even if the how is complicated. Your mother orchestrated this in a way. She'd be insufferably smug about it. Tell me more about her. So he did, stories flowing as they worked. Bet Baldwin, the young lawyer, the devoted mother, the grieving widow, the woman who found solace in art and beauty, even as cancer stole everything else. She would have loved this, he said, gesturing to the transformed library. Not just the design, but the life in it, the warmth you've brought back. It's not finished. Neither are we. The words hung between them, promise and patience intertwined. Her phone buzzed, a text from Grace. Divorce papers are ready for final signing tomorrow. You're almost free. Free. The word should have brought relief, but instead she felt only sadness for the woman who'd signed the first papers 7 years ago, so sure she'd found forever. What is it? Alistair asked, noticing her expression. Final divorce papers tomorrow. How do you feel? Like I'm finally closing a book I should have never opened. Or opening a new one you were always meant to read. She looked at him, this gentle, complicated man who'd found her through loss and accident and his mother's prescient eye. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of believing again. Of trusting that something this good can be real. He took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. Then we'll be scared together. But Isla, I'd rather be terrified with you than safe with anyone else. You're quoting someone. No, that's all me. Terrible, but mine. Perfectly imperfect. Like us. Like us. As they returned to work, comfortable in shared silence, Isla thought she heard something. Maybe the house settling, maybe the wind, or maybe the approving ghost of Bet Baldwin, satisfied that her son had finally found someone who saw him just as clearly as she'd once seen a young designer's soul in her work. The truth, Isla realized, wasn't about how they'd found each other. It was about choosing to stay, to build, to trust in the possibility of love after loss. And for the first time in a year, she wasn't afraid of the choosing. Chapter 7. The Unraveling. Naomi Watts looked nothing like the woman who'd stolen Isla's husband. Sitting in the coffee shop she'd asked to meet at, she seemed smaller, younger, her designer clothes wrinkled, her perfect makeup smeared with tears. "Thank you for coming," Naomi said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I have no right to ask." Isla studied the woman across from her, the woman she'd hated, envied, blamed. Now she saw only a girl, really, barely 28, drowning in consequences. "What do you want, Naomi?" "To warn you, to apologize. Maybe both." Naomi's hands shook as she lifted her coffee. "Stout's lost everything, but he's not going quietly. He blames you." "Me? He's the one who—" "Logic doesn't matter to him anymore. Mason took everything, exposed the embezzlement, the offshore accounts, the fraud. The FBI is involved now. Stout could go to prison." Isla felt a cold satisfaction, quickly followed by exhaustion. "That has nothing to do with me." In his mind it does. He keeps saying if you'd just stayed in your place, none of this would have happened. He's been watching you and Mr. Baldwin. Watching? Naomi pulled out her phone, showing Isla photos. Her and Alistair at the library. At lunch, that one kiss in the garden they'd thought was private. "He hired someone, a private investigator. He's trying to prove you were having an affair before the divorce, trying to invalidate the settlement." "There was barely a settlement, and we weren't—" "I know. I've seen the timeline. You were nothing but professional until after he left you, but Stout doesn't care about truth anymore. He just wants to hurt you." Isla's phone buzzed. "Alistair, where are you? Theodore said you left suddenly." She texted back, "Coffee with Naomi Watts. It's fine." His response was immediate. "Address. I'm coming." She sent it, knowing he'd worry until he saw her safe. "Why are you telling me this?" Isla asked Naomi. "Because I helped create this monster. I thought I was special, that he'd left you for me because I was younger, prettier, more exciting." Naomi laughed bitterly. "But I was just convenient, a prop in his performance. When I found out about the embezzlement, I confronted him. He grabbed me, said I belonged to him, that he'd made me, that I was nothing without him." The words were hauntingly familiar. Isla reached across the table, touching Naomi's hand briefly. "You're not nothing. I'm 28, no education, no work history except mistress." "What am I?" "You're someone starting over. It's terrifying, but it's also freedom." The door chimed, and Alistair entered, his presence immediately shifting the energy. He assessed the situation in a glance, then approached carefully. "Ms. Watts," he said politely. "Isla, everything all right?" "Naomi was warning me about Stout. He's hired an investigator." Alistair's expression darkened. "I know. My security team intercepted him last week trying to access the estate. We've handled it." "You knew?" Isla turned to him. "You knew and didn't tell me." "I didn't want to worry you. You're finally starting to relax, to smile again. I couldn't bear to—" "We talked about honesty." "You're right, I'm sorry." He turned to Naomi. "Ms. Watts, are you safe? Does he know where you're staying?" Naomi shook her head. "I'm at a hotel, under my maiden name, but I'm almost out of money. He froze the accounts before I could—" "I'll have Theodore arrange something," Alistair said simply, a safe place, a lawyer, whatever you need. Why would you help me? Because you're trying to do the right thing now, that matters. Isla watched him take charge, making calls, arranging protection and support for the woman who'd helped destroy her marriage. This was who he was, someone who fixed things, who protected people, who couldn't see suffering without trying to ease it. Later, after Naomi had been safely escorted to a secure hotel, Isla and Alistair sat in his car in silence. "You're angry," he said. "I'm confused. You keep protecting me from things I need to know. It's who I am. I protect the people I—" He stopped. "The people you what?" "The people I love." The word hung between them, fully spoken for the first time without qualifiers or conditions. "You love me. With everything I have, even the broken parts, especially those. They're how the light gets in." Before she could respond, her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? You think you're so clever?" Stout's voice, slurred and vicious. "Playing the victim while you spread your legs for Baldwin's billions. Stout, I'm going to destroy you. Both of you. I've got photos, evidence. Everyone will know what a whore you really are." Alistair took the phone from her trembling hand. "Duncan, this is Alistair Baldwin. If you contact Isla again, if you come near her, if you so much as speak her name, I will end you. Not financially, you've done that yourself, but I will ensure you spend the next 20 years in federal prison. Are we clear?" "You can't threaten." "I don't make threats. I make promises. Test me." He hung up, then immediately called someone. "Theodore, activate the legal team. Full restraining order. And call our friend at the FBI. I believe Mr. Duncan just violated his bail conditions by making threatening calls." Isla was shaking. Alistair pulled her into his arms, and she let herself be held, feeling safe despite everything crumbling around them. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "I won't let him hurt you again." "I'm not some damsel who needs saving. No, you're a queen who deserves an army." That night she stayed at the estate, not in the guest room, but not in his room either. Instead, they sat up in the library, talking until dawn, about Stout's descent, about Naomi's revelation, about the strange twists that had brought them together. "Do you think people can really change?" she asked, as sunrise painted the room gold. "I think people can choose to be better. Every day they can choose." "What do you choose?" "You. Every day, in every way, I choose you. Even with all this drama. Especially with it. You're worth fighting for, Isla Fisher." Her phone buzzed. "Grace. Turn on the news." The headline made her stomach drop. "Investment banker Stout Duncan arrested on federal embezzlement charges." The footage showed Stout being led away in handcuffs, his perfect image finally completely shattered. But it was the follow-up that made her gasp. Photos of her and Alistair from The Investigator, sold to the tabloids with salacious headlines about the billionaire's new toy. "I'm sorry," she said to Alistair. "This is going to hurt your reputation." "My reputation?" he laughed. "Isla, my reputation is being a cold, calculating businessman. Being seen as a man in love only helps. This isn't how I wanted people to know about us. There is no us, not publicly, not yet." He took her hands. "We control our narrative. When you're ready, if you're ready, we'll tell our story our way. What if I'm never ready? Then we'll be the world's worst kept secret, and I'll be fine with that too." Mason Cross called that afternoon. "Thought you should know. Stout's going to take a plea deal, 5 to 10 years minimum. It's over, Isla. Over. Her marriage, Stout's empire, the life she'd thought she wanted, all over." But as she looked at Alistair, reading peacefully beside her, Fitzgerald purring in his lap, she realized endings were just beginnings in disguise. "What are you thinking?" he asked, noticing her gaze. "That maybe unraveling isn't always bad. Sometimes things need to fall apart so better things can come together." "Is that what we are?" better things. We're something. Something good. She thought about it, the complicated path that had brought them together, the challenges still ahead, the way her heart raced when he smiled. Something real, she said finally, and that's enough for now. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her palm gently. More than enough. Outside, the world was spinning with scandal and gossip. But inside the library, in their sanctuary of books and afternoon light, Isla felt the first stirrings of something she'd thought Stout had killed forever. Peace. Chapter 8. The Descent. The call came while Isla was selecting fabric samples for the library's final touches. Theodore's voice was unusually animated. "Miss Fisher? Mr. Baldwin asked me to call. There's been a development with Mr. Duncan." Her stomach clenched. What kind of development? He's lost everything. The FBI seized all assets. Ms. Watts testified against him, and he's been released on bail, but has nowhere to go. No one will take his calls. She should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt hollow. That evening, Alistair found her in the library, staring at the space she'd transformed. In 3 weeks, they'd host the reveal, a small gathering of his mother's friends to celebrate the restoration. "You heard about Stout," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. How do you feel?" "Like I'm watching someone else's tragedy. He's a stranger now." Alistair sat beside her on the new reading sofa, close but not touching. They'd been careful since the photos surfaced, maintaining professional distance despite the current running between them. "I have something to ask you," he said carefully, "but I need you to know you can say no." "What is it?" He pulled out a small velvet box, and her heart stopped. But when he opened it, it wasn't a ring, it was an antique key. "It's to the estate," he explained quickly, seeing her expression. I'm not proposing, yet, but I want you to have a place that's yours, completely. The East Wing, it could be your studio, your sanctuary. No strings, no expectations. Alistair, before you say no, come see it." The East Wing was breathtaking, flooded with northern light, perfect for design work. He'd already had it partially prepared, drafting tables, sample libraries, everything she'd dreamed of in a workspace. "This is too much." "No, it's not enough. But it's a start." "A start to what?" "To the life I want to build with you. When you're ready. If you're ready." She turned to him, this patient, impossible man who offered everything and asked for nothing. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Trust abundance. Stout taught me that love was conditional, transactional. You offer it like breathing. Because that's what it should be, easy as breathing." He moved closer, his hand finding hers. "I've been thinking about time, how we measure it in befores and afters. Before my mother died, after my divorce, before I met you, and after. There is no after you, Isla. There's only with." She kissed him then, deep and certain, tasting promise on his lips. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. "I have a confession," she said. "I've been getting calls, design offers, big ones, from people who saw the photos, heard the story. That's wonderful. One's in Paris, 6 months, restoring a museum." His face didn't change, but she felt him pull back internally. "You should take it." "Just like that?" "If it's what you want, yes." "What about us?" "We'll survive. Distance is nothing compared to what we've already overcome." She studied his face, seeing the cost of those words. "You'd let me go?" "I'd never hold you back. That's not love. That's ownership." "And if I stayed?" "Then I'd be the happiest man alive, but only if you stayed for you, not for me." Her phone rang before she could answer. Grace. "Isla, you need to know. Stout's been calling my office. He wants to meet with you. Something about closure." "Absolutely not," Alistair said immediately. But Isla felt something shift in her chest. Actually, maybe I should. Isla, no, he's dangerous. He's broken. There's a difference. 3 days later, against Alistair's wishes but with his security nearby, Isla met Stout at a public restaurant. The man across from her bore little resemblance to the polished banker she'd married. He was thin, unshaven, his expensive suit replaced by ill-fitting borrowed clothes. "You look well," he said bitterly. "You wanted closure. Talk. I loved you, you know, in my way. Your way was possession. Maybe, but it was real." "No, Stout, real love doesn't humiliate. It doesn't diminish. It doesn't discard people like broken toys." He stared at his hands. "I have nothing. No one. Even Naomi." Naomi was 28 and traumatized. What did you expect? "I expected loyalty." Isla laughed, sharp and bitter. "Like the loyalty you showed me?" "I'm going to prison, Isla. 5 years minimum. My lawyer says maybe 7. "I know." "Are you happy, seeing me like this?" She considered the question honestly. I'm not happy. I'm not sad either. I nothing you, Stout. You're a stranger who shares memories with someone I used to be. You've changed. I've remembered who I was before you convinced me to forget." "And Baldwin? You love him? That's none of your business?" "He'll bore you eventually. All that old money politeness, that careful distance. He's worth 1,000 of you. I made you. No." She stood, pulling on her coat. "You almost destroyed me. There's a difference." As she walked away, Stout called out, "I still have the photos of us, our wedding, our trips. Keep them," she said without turning. "Someone should remember the woman who died trying to be worthy of you. I prefer the one who lived by walking away." Outside, Alistair was waiting by his car, just as she'd known he would be. "How was it?" "Necessary. And now? Now I'm free." That evening they worked side by side in the library, preparing for the reveal. Mrs. Chen brought tea, Theodore handled logistics, and Fitzgerald supervised from his perch on the restored mantelpiece. "I'm not taking the Paris job," Isla said suddenly. Alistair's hand stilled on the book he was shelving. "Why?" "Because I realized something when I saw Stout today. I spent 7 years running toward someone else's idea of success. I don't want to spend the next 7 running away from my own happiness. And your happiness is here, this work, this place." She moved closer to him. "You, Isla, I love you." The words came out sure and strong. "I love your terrible poetry recitations and your inability to organize anything and the way you look at me like I'm made of starlight. I love you, and I'm terrified, but I'm choosing it anyway." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. "Say it again." "I love you, Alistair Baldwin. I've been waiting my whole life to hear that." "Your whole life. All 47 years led to this moment. That's mathematically improbable. That's fate." They were interrupted by Theodore clearing his throat. "Sir, Ms. Fisher, there's something you should see." The news was playing on his tablet. Stout Duncan, sentenced to 7 years federal prison, but it was the subplot that made them both freeze. In a last act of spite, he'd sold their entire personal photo collection to a tabloid. "I'm sorry," Theodore said. "We tried to stop it, but—" "It doesn't matter," Isla said, surprising herself by meaning it. "They're pictures of a dead woman and the man who killed her. Let them publish ghosts." The next morning, the tabloids ran the story. "From trophy wife to billionaire's beloved, Isla Fisher's journey." But they'd gotten it wrong. She wasn't anyone's anything. She was her own. The library reveal was in 3 days. Invitations had been sent, caterers arranged. It would be their first public appearance together if she chose to make it that. "Are you ready?" Alistair asked that night as they finalized preparations. "For the party?" for everything after. She looked around the transformed library, warm where it had been cold, alive where it had been static. She'd done that. She'd taken something broken and made it beautiful again, just like she was doing with herself. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it. In prison, Stout Duncan would read about the reveal in a weeks-old society page, seeing photos of his ex-wife radiant in emerald green, standing beside Alistair Baldwin as they unveiled the restored Whitmore Library. He would notice how she glowed, how Alistair looked at her, how the room itself seemed to celebrate her vision, and for the first time he would understand what he'd lost, not a possession or a trophy, but a woman whose light he'd tried to extinguish, only to watch her burn brighter without him. The descent was complete, not hers. She'd risen. His. Chapter 9. The preparation. The morning of the library reveal arrived crisp and bright, light streaming through the restored windows like a benediction. Isla stood in the center of the transformed space, checking every detail for the 100th time. The sage green walls perfectly complemented the original woodwork. The new reading nooks invited contemplation. The collection, carefully curated and reorganized, seemed to breathe with new life. "You've checked that shelf 4 times, Alistair observed from the doorway, coffee in hand. "It hasn't moved. I need everything perfect." "It already is." "Your mother's friends are coming. Society people who knew me as Stout's wife. They'll be looking for flaws, for proof that I don't belong." He crossed to her, setting down his coffee to take her hands. "They'll be looking at a master designer who transformed a mausoleum into a sanctuary, and if they can't see that, they're not worth worrying about." Mrs. Chen appeared with her tablet. "Ms. Fisher," the time-style section called. "They want to photograph the library for their design issue." "Tell them no," Alistair said immediately. "This is private." "Actually," Isla said slowly, "tell them yes, but only the room, not us." "Are you sure? I want my work to speak for itself. Let them see what I can do." Theodore arrived with a crisis. The caterers had brought the wrong color linens. Then the florist called about a substitute for the gardenias, small fires that Isla extinguished with growing confidence. "You're different," Grace observed, arriving early to help. "Comfortable in your power." "I'm remembering who I was before I forgot." "And who's that?" Isla looked around the library, at Alistair directing staff, at Mrs. Chen fussing with flower arrangements, at Fitzgerald supervising from his favorite perch. "Someone who belongs here, not because of him, but because of me." Grace squeezed her hand. "It's about time." Charlotte Hayes arrived next, elegant as always. "Darling, the space is magnificent. Bet would be beside herself with joy." "You think so?" "I know so. She talked about you, you know, before she died. Said you had the gift of seeing what spaces wanted to become. More early arrivals, Oliver Thorne, Alistair's lawyer and friend, Harper Street James from the gallery, even Stella Morrison, Isla's first client after the divorce." "The vultures will come too," Charlotte warned quietly. "The ones who feed on gossip. Are you ready?" "Let them come." By 6 o'clock the library was full. Isla recognized faces from that horrible charity gala, some who'd witnessed her humiliation, others who'd whispered behind their hands. But now they were in her space, marveling at her work. "Extraordinary transformation," someone said. "Such vision," another agreed. "Bet would have adored this." Alistair found her during a quiet moment, pulling her into a corner. "You're glowing." It's terror disguised as confidence. It's beauty recognizing itself. That doesn't even make sense. Nothing about us makes sense, but here we are. Theodore appeared with an urgent whisper. "Sir, there's a situation. Someone's here who wasn't invited." They turned to see Mason Cross at the entrance, Stout's former business partner who'd exposed his crimes. "I'll handle it," Alistair said, but Isla stopped him. "No, I will." She approached Mason with measured steps, aware of eyes following her. "Mr. Cross, you weren't on the guest list." "I know. I'm sorry. I needed to see you." He looked exhausted, haunted. "I wanted to apologize. I knew what Stout was for years and said nothing. I was complicit in how he treated you." "Why speak now?" "Because Naomi came to me desperate and terrified, and I saw what he really was. What I'd enabled." He pulled out an envelope. "These are documents you should have. Proof that you contributed more to his success than he ever acknowledged. If you ever need them for your reputation." "I don't build my reputation on his failures." "No, you build it on this." He gestured to the library. "It's magnificent. You're magnificent. He never deserved you." "I know." The simple confidence in her answer seemed to break something in him. "I'm sorry. For all of it. I forgive you." Just like that. "Holding on to anger only poisons me. You were a coward, Mr. Cross, but you're trying to be better. That matters." As he left, Alistair appeared at her elbow. "That was gracious. That was strategic. He owns 3 hotels. They all need redesigns." Alistair laughed, delighted. "The student becomes the master. I learned from the best." The evening flowed on. Isla found herself holding court, discussing design philosophy with people who'd once looked through her. Her confidence grew with each conversation, each compliment on her work. Then she saw her, Naomi Watts, hovering at the entrance, clearly terrified, but determined. The room seemed to hold its breath as Isla walked toward her. "I'm sorry," Naomi said quickly. "I know I shouldn't be here, but I needed to see it. The transformation, to see something beautiful after so much ugliness." Isla could have destroyed her with a word. The room was waiting for it, hungry for drama. Instead, she said, "The reading nook by the east window has the best light. The poetry section is particularly well curated." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." "We all deserve beauty, Naomi, even those of us who've made mistakes." As Naomi disappeared into the stacks, Charlotte appeared. "That was either very kind or very clever. Can't it be both?" Bet would have said exactly the same thing. The highlight of the evening came when Alistair called for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to celebrate not just a restoration, but a resurrection. This library was my mother's heart, and it had been slowly dying since she left us. Isla Fisher didn't just restore it, she brought it back to life." He turned to her, his eyes soft with something that made her breath catch. "But more than that, she brought life back to this entire house, to me. She took broken things and made them beautiful again." The room was silent, everyone sensing the weight of the moment. "Isla, would you come here?" She walked to him on unsteady legs, aware this was more than a speech about the library. He didn't get on one knee. That would have been too much, too public for who they were. Instead, he simply took her hand and spoke to her as if they were alone. "My mother wrote that she recognized your soul in your work. I recognize it too, in every choice, every color, every carefully placed book. You don't just design spaces, you heal them. You heal people." "Alistair." "I'm not proposing," he said quickly, getting a laugh from the crowd. "Not yet, but I am declaring, in front of all these witnesses, that I love you, that I intend to love you for as long as you'll let me, that you've transformed not just this library, but my entire world." The room erupted in applause, but Isla barely heard it. She was lost in Alistair's eyes, in the promise there. "You can't just say things like that in public," she whispered. "I can say them anywhere. I love you in public and private, in silence and chaos, in joy and sorrow. You're impossible. I'm yours." She kissed him then, not caring about the audience or the photos that would surely surface. Let them see. Let them know that Isla Fisher, who'd been publicly discarded, was now publicly chosen. The party continued late into the evening, but Isla barely noticed. She was wrapped in a bubble of joy, moving through conversations with grace, but always aware of Alistair nearby, his presence an anchor. As the last guests departed, they stood together in the transformed library, Fitzgerald weaving between their legs. "It was perfect," Alistair said. "Almost." What was missing? She pulled out her phone, showing him an email. "This came during the party. The Museum of Modern Art wants me to redesign their reading room." "Isla, that's incredible." "They want to announce it at their gala next month, as their featured designer. The same gala where Stout announced our divorce." "Yes." He pulled her close. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." "I'm not proving anything. I'm claiming my place, the one I earned, not the one I married into." "Then we'll go together? If you're ready for that." "I've been ready since the moment you spilled wine on my books." That was Fitzgerald. Semantics. They stood together in the library Bet Baldwin had dreamed of, that Isla had manifested, that love had transformed. Tomorrow there would be challenges. The MoMA project, the gossip, the navigation of two lives becoming one. But tonight, in the soft light of success and recognition, Isla Fisher stood in her power, held by a man who saw her completely, surrounded by beauty she'd created. She was no longer the woman who'd been declared unworthy in public. She was the woman who'd made herself undeniable. The preparation was complete. Not for revenge, that was too small a goal. For triumph. Chapter 10. The Reckoning. The Museum of Modern Art's annual gala glittered with the kind of aggressive elegance that Isla had once found intimidating. Now, standing at the entrance in a custom emerald gown that made her dark skin glow, she felt only a quiet confidence. "You're sure about this?" Alistair asked, devastating in his tuxedo, his hand warm on her lower back. "I've never been more sure of anything." It was the same ballroom, the same charity event, moved from the Children's Hospital to MoMA this year. Even some of the same faces that had witnessed her humiliation barely a year ago, but everything else had changed. "Ms. Fisher!" The museum's director rushed over, beaming. "Our star designer! Everyone's dying to hear about your vision for the reading room." As they moved through the crowd, Isla noticed the shift. Where once she'd been invisible, except as Stout's appendage, now people sought her out. Her work had been featured in 3 major design magazines. The Whitmore Library had won an Preservation Award. The community center in Brooklyn bore her name as lead designer. "Isla Fisher, isn't it?" A woman she vaguely recognized from the old days approached. "Your work is extraordinary. I've been hoping to commission you for my Southampton house." The conversation flowed, but Isla found herself scanning the room. Something felt off. Then she saw him. Not Stout. He was serving 5 to 7 in federal prison, but there by the service entrance, wearing a catering uniform with haunted eyes, Stout Duncan, her ex-husband. The room seemed to tilt. Alistair followed her gaze and went rigid. "That's impossible. He's in prison." Theodore, never far from Alistair's side, was already on his phone. After a quick conversation, he returned, face grim. "Early release, good behavior and overcrowding. He got out 3 days ago. 3 days, and he'd come here to this place, on this night." "We're leaving," Alistair said immediately. "No." Isla's voice was steel. "I'm not running, not anymore." She watched Stout move through the room with practiced invisibility, the way servants were trained to be unseen. He was serving champagne to people who'd once courted his favor. The mighty hadn't just fallen, they'd been erased. "Ladies and gentlemen," the museum director called for attention, "tonight we celebrate transformation. Our reading room, closed for decades, will be reborn thanks to the vision of Isla Fisher, whose work brings warmth and humanity to every space she touches." Applause filled the room. Isla moved to the microphone, aware of Stout frozen by the kitchen door, tray trembling in his hands. "Thank you," she began, her voice clear and strong. "A year ago, in this very room, I learned that the life I'd built was an illusion. I was told, publicly, that I was unworthy of the world I'd tried so hard to enter." The room was silent, everyone remembering. That moment broke me. But in breaking, I discovered something remarkable. I had been trying to be worthy of the wrong things, of someone else's definition of success, of love that came with conditions and requirements. She found Alistair's eyes in the crowd, drew strength from the pride there. "This past year, I've learned that worthiness isn't granted by others. It's claimed by ourselves. It's in the work we do, the beauty we create, the grace we maintain when the world tries to make us small." Movement caught her eye. Stout was approaching, not with threat, but with something else, desperation maybe, or recognition. Security started forward, but Isla held up a hand. "Every space tells a story," she continued, eyes on her ex-husband. "Some stories are about what was, but the best designs, the ones that truly transform, are about what could be." Stout stopped a few feet away. This close, she could see what prison and loss had done to him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something hollow. The reading room will be a place where stories begin, not end, where everyone, regardless of background or bank account, can find beauty and belonging. She stepped down from the podium. The crowd parted, creating a path between her and Stout. The entire room held its breath. "Hello, Stout." "Isla." His voice was broken. I needed work. The agency didn't tell me it was this event until you were here. I can leave. I should leave." "No." She studied him. This man who'd tried to destroy her, who'd called her unworthy, who'd discarded her like an outdated accessory. "You should work. You should serve these people their champagne and remember what it feels like to be invisible in rooms where you once mattered." "I'm sorry." The words seemed to physically hurt him. "For everything. For what I said, what I did. For wasting 7 years of your life." "They weren't wasted. They were teaching me what I didn't want, so I could recognize what I did." Alistair appeared at her side, protective but not possessive. "Is everything all right?" "Yes." She touched his hand briefly. Stout was just leaving. "He has work to do." But Stout wasn't looking at her anymore. He was staring at Alistair with something like awe. "You love her, more than you could comprehend. I can see it, the way you look at her. I never—" He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. "I should have looked at her that way. I should have seen what I had." "Yes," Alistair said simply. "You should have." Stout turned back to Isla. "The community center in Brooklyn. I read about it. You're doing what you always dreamed. I'm doing what you said was beneath us. I was wrong. About everything." He lifted his tray slightly. "I have to." "Go," she said, not unkindly. "Work your shift. Earn your wages. Build something from nothing. It's what I did." As he walked away, disappearing back into his invisible role, Isla felt something release in her chest. Not forgiveness. He hadn't earned that. Not satisfaction. His suffering brought her no joy. Resolution. "Are you all right?" Alistair asked quietly. "I'm perfect." And she was. As the evening continued, as she discussed her vision for the reading room, as she accepted congratulations and commissions, she kept catching glimpses of Stout serving drinks, clearing plates, being looked through by people who'd once feared his influence. "You could have destroyed him completely," Charlotte Hayes murmured at one point. "One word from you, and he'd have been thrown out." "Why would I waste words on someone who no longer exists in my world?" Near midnight, as the gala wound down, Isla found herself on the same terrace where, a lifetime ago, she'd fled to hide her tears. This time she stood tall, champagne in hand, Alistair beside her. "Look," he said, pointing to the sky. "Stars. In Manhattan? Sometimes if you know how to look, you can see light even in the darkest places. That's either profound or terrible. Both. I'm consistently both." She laughed, leaning into him. "I love you. Still? More? Even after tonight? Especially after tonight. You let me handle it my way. You didn't try to save me or fight for me. You stood beside me. Always." Theodore appeared with their coats. "The car's ready whenever you are." As they prepared to leave, Isla saw Stout one last time. He was collecting glasses, his shoulders bent with exhaustion. For a moment, their eyes met across the room. She didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge him at all. She simply turned away, taking Alistair's arm, walking toward her future. But as they passed the service area, she heard her name. "Ela." She paused, but didn't turn. "You were always worthy," Stout said quietly. "I was the one who wasn't." She walked on without responding. There was nothing left to say. In the car, Alistair pulled out a small box. "I was going to wait, but if that's a ring, it's not. Open it." Inside was an antique compass, its face inscribed with a quote. "She wasn't looking for a knight. She was looking for a sword. I don't understand. You never needed saving. You needed someone to stand beside you while you saved yourself. I want to be that person, Isla, for as long as you'll let me." "Alistair Baldwin, are you proposing without proposing?" "I'm proposing a partnership, a real one, where we both choose each other every day with no conditions except honesty and growth. And love. Love is the foundation, not the decoration." She kissed him then, deep and sure, tasting promise and possibility. "Yes," she said against his lips. "Yes to what? To all of it. To partnership and growth and choosing each other. To building something beautiful from the ashes of what was. Is that a yes to marriage? Ask me properly and find out." He laughed, pulling her close. "Bet Fisher. I'm keeping my name. Isla Fisher, keeper of her own name, transformer of spaces, healer of broken things. Will you marry me?" "Yes, but not yet." "When?" "When the reading room is complete. When I've proven to myself that I'm not running toward you to escape something, but choosing you because you're my home. I can wait, even if it takes years. Especially then. The best transformations take time." 6 months later, the MoMA reading room opened to universal acclaim. The design was featured globally, cementing Isla's reputation as a visionary. The wedding was small, just family and close friends in the Whitmore Library, surrounded by books and beauty and the ghost of Bet Baldwin's approval. Stout Duncan, still working catering jobs while rebuilding his life, would see the announcement in the Times. The photo showed Isla radiant in cream silk, Alistair looking at her like she'd hung the moon, Fitzgerald positioned prominently between them. He would stare at it for a long time, seeing what he'd had and lost, what he'd thrown away for an illusion of something better. Then he would fold the paper carefully and go to work. Because that's what you did when you'd lost everything. You worked, you survived, you remembered. And you lived with the knowledge that somewhere in the city, the woman you'd called unworthy was living a life so beautiful it hurt to imagine, with a man who knew her value from the start. The reckoning was complete, not with revenge or cruelty, but with something far more devastating, indifference. Isla Fisher Baldwin, who kept her name and added his, had built a life so magnificent that her ex-husband's existence was merely a footnote, a cautionary tale whispered at parties. Remember Stout Duncan? He had everything and threw it away for nothing. And in the Whitmore Library, surrounded by beauty and books and boundless love, Isla would sometimes remember the woman who'd stood humiliated in a ballroom, thinking her life was over. "Thank you," she would whisper to that broken version of herself. Thank you for surviving long enough to become me. The diamond hadn't been thrown away after all. It had simply been waiting for the right light to shine. Epilogue. 5 years later. The private jet touched down at Teterboro on a crisp October morning. Isla looked up from her sketches, plans for a new project in Tokyo, as Leicester squeezed her hand. Ready? For the interview? Always. The Times was doing a feature on power couples who'd found love after loss. Their story had become something of a legend in certain circles. The discarded wife who'd become one of the world's most sought-after designers, the billionaire who'd waited patiently for her to choose him. But as they descended the jet's stairs, Isla saw him. Stout stood by the terminal's coffee cart, 5 years older, completely grey now, wearing a simple uniform. He was a driver for a car service. She recognized the logo. Their eyes met across the tarmac. Time stopped. Then Stout did something unexpected. He smiled, not bitter or false, but genuine, and raised his coffee cup in a small salute. An acknowledgement. A blessing, maybe. Isla nodded once, the smallest recognition. Then she walked on, her hand in Alistair's, toward the car, waiting to take them to their interview, their life, their future. Behind them, Stout watched the jet being serviced, watched the couple disappear into a Bentley, watched the life he'd thrown away drive off into a Manhattan morning. "That your ex?" his co-worker asked, having heard the stories. "No," Stout said quietly, "that's the woman I never deserved to have." He finished his coffee and went back to work. Some reckonings never end. They just teach you to live with the echo of what you lost, while the diamond you discarded illuminates someone else's world. And in that Bentley, Isla Fisher Baldwin leaned against her husband's shoulder and smiled. She'd won not by destroying him, but by becoming herself. The greatest revenge was a life well lived. And hers. It was magnificent.